Dan stood behind me. You don't want to stop. I have to. He moved closer. Tell me you don't want me. I closed my eyes. I can't, I breathed. But it doesn't matter anymore. It was never supposed to happen. Dan's hands gripped my waist. His lips brushed my neck. Then let's stop pretending. Tell him. Leave him. I spun around, my heart slamming in my chest. Are you out of your mind? He's your father. Don's jaw tightened. And you're his wife. But you've been mine. I slapped him, not out of anger but panic. We had crossed every line, and now we were dancing on the edge of exposure. I felt sick. Twisted. Then came the sound that froze my blood. A slow clap. We both turned. Richie stood at the foot of the staircase. His face was pale, expression unreadable, eyes locked on me. In one hand he held his phone. In the other a recording. Our recording. The security camera from the study I had forgotten even existed. He had heard everything. Every word. Every breath. Silence fell like a guillotine. I built this empire for my family, Richie said, voice flat. I gave you a home, Luna. I gave you everything. And you let my own son screw you under my roof. Hello everyone. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, do well to subscribe and hit on notifications. To all my returning subscribers, thank you for always watching my videos. Richie had been talking about bringing Dan home for months, but I hadn't paid it much mind. He's grown into a man now, he said over and over again, usually with pride shining in his eyes. I had smiled politely each time, nodding, sipping my wine, pretending to care. I didn't think much of it, just another stepchild I'd have to tolerate. But when I actually saw Dan for the first time, everything inside me shifted. It was a Saturday afternoon. The Texas sun burned hot across the sky, and I was in the backyard, pruning Richie's favorite rose bushes. My white sundress clung to my skin, and sweat trickled down my back. I was humming softly to myself, trying to ignore the stifling heat, when I heard the gate creak open. I turned, and there he was. Tall. Dan. Muscular. His ocean blue eyes scanned the yard until they landed on me. For a moment we just stared at each other, like time froze between us. Then he smiled, slow, deliberate, confident. You must be Luna, he said, walking toward me with long, steady strides. I am, I answered, standing up and wiping my palms on my dress. You must be Dan. We shook hands. His grip was firm but warm, lingering just a second longer than was polite. His eyes didn't leave mine. Not even for a heartbeat. You're even more stunning than Dad described, he said. I laughed nervously, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear. Flattery already? We've just met. Not flattery, he said. Just observation. There was something in his tone, something bold and slightly dangerous. It sent a chill up my spine. I told myself it was nothing. He was just being friendly. But deep down my body reacted in ways I hadn't felt in years. That evening, the three of us had dinner together in the Great Hall. Richie did most of the talking, telling old stories, bragging about his business ventures, and asking Dan about his life in New York. I sat there quietly, drinking my wine, stealing glances at Dan across the table. He wasn't looking at Richie. He was looking at me. His gaze traveled slowly over my collarbone, the dip of my neckline, then back to my eyes. I shifted in my seat, heart pounding. I wasn't used to being looked at like that, not since my early 30s. Richie had grown too busy to notice the details. But Dan noticed. And I noticed him noticing. After dinner, Richie took a call in his study. Dan and I stepped out onto the balcony. The breeze had cooled, and the moon hung low in the sky. You like it here? I asked just to make conversation. I do now, he replied, his voice low and deliberate. I turned to him, half smiling. You're flirting again. He shrugged. I call it honesty. I should have walked away. I should have said goodnight, gone to my room and locked the door. But instead I stood there beside him, silently letting his words wrap around me like warm smoke. That night, in bed beside Richie, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, heart racing, body burning. I had spent years in that house being the perfect wife. Loyal, presentable, predictable. But one look from Dan had woken something I thought was long dead. And I had a terrifying feeling it was only the beginning. Richie left early the next morning for a business trip to Dallas. As always, he kissed me on the forehead and told me not to wait up. I smiled and nodded, pretending to be half asleep. Truthfully, I was wide awake. Restless since the moment Dan walked into our lives. The house felt different without Richie in it. Quieter, lighter, and dangerously open. I spent the morning cleaning rooms that didn't need cleaning, folding already folded laundry, trying to stay busy. But Dan was everywhere. His scent lingered in the hallway. His cologne clung to the air. His laughter echoed in my mind like a song on repeat. By noon, I was in the kitchen making tea when he walked in. Shirtless, barefoot. A towel hung low around his waist, his wet hair slicked back from the shower. "Morning," he said, casually leaning against the doorway. I swallowed hard, pretending to stir my tea. "You always walk around like that?" I asked, trying to sound amused. He smirked. "Only when I know you're home." I turned toward him, arms crossed, trying to play it cool. "You're going to give me a heart attack one day, Dan." He stepped closer. "That's not what I want to give you." The air between us grew thick, dangerous. My breath hitched. I knew where this was going. I should have stopped it. I should have reminded him I was his father's wife. But I didn't. Instead, I stood there, frozen by the hunger in his eyes. "You shouldn't talk to me like that," I whispered. "But you like it," he replied, taking another step. "Don't you?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. 'Cause yes, I liked it. Too much. Then he reached out and touched my cheek, gently, like he was testing the limits. I didn't flinch. His fingers slid down to my chin, lifting it just slightly. "Luna," he murmured. "Do you ever wonder what it would feel like to be kissed by someone who actually sees you?" That broke me. Before I could think, before I could stop myself, my lips met his. It was slow at first. Warm. Careful. Then his hands wrapped around my waist, and my body pressed into his bare chest. My fingers tangled in his damp hair as our mouths moved hungrily, desperately. Like we'd waited forever for this moment. He lifted me onto the kitchen counter, and I let out a soft gasp. My legs wrapped around him without thought, as if my body had decided this long before my mind could catch up. His lips moved down to my neck, leaving trails of fire with every kiss. Felt wrong. It was wrong. But it also felt like being touched for the first time in years. We didn't go all the way, not then. But by the time we pulled apart, our breaths ragged and our bodies trembling, I knew it wasn't over. Dan leaned his forehead against mine and whispered, "Tell me to stop and I will." I looked into his eyes and said nothing, because I didn't want him to stop. Later that night, I stood in the shower for nearly an hour, water scalding my skin. I hoped it would burn away the guilt, but it didn't. I still felt his hands on my waist, his breath on my neck, his lips on mine. And worse, I wanted to feel them again. That was the day the line between right and wrong blurred forever. After that kiss, there was no turning back. We didn't talk about it, not directly, but everything changed. Every glance Dan gave me was filled with heat. Every brush of his hand across my back felt intentional. And every moment Richie left the room became a dangerous opportunity. It started with subtle touches. A hand on my lower back. A whisper too close to my ear. A teasing glance when Richie wasn't looking. But within days we were sneaking off like teenagers in heat. The first time we did it, I was folding laundry in the guest room. The door was open. Richie was in the garage taking a call. Dan walked in, closed the door softly, and locked it. He didn't say a word. Just grabbed my waist, spun me around, and kissed me like he had been starving for weeks. I gasped as his hand slid under my blouse, pulling me into him. I knew we didn't have much time. And maybe that made it worse, more thrilling. More dangerous. I should have stopped him. I didn't. He bent me over the guest bed. and everything that had been simmering between us finally boiled over. His movements were urgent, like he couldn't stand another minute without being inside me. And God help me, I didn't want to wait either. That night, I looked Richie in the eyes while we had dinner. He told me about his trip, about deals he was closing, about how grateful he was to have me by his side. I smiled, nodded, sipped my wine, while Dan sat across from us silently watching me, lips curled into a smirk. After that, it became routine. Richie's meetings, trips, or gym sessions gave us windows of time, and we used every second. We did it in the pool house, in Richie's home office, on the kitchen floor, even once in the master bedroom while Richie was asleep down the hall. It was insane, reckless, but the more wrong it felt, the harder it became to stop. Dan was nothing like his father. He didn't ask permission. He took what he wanted. And when he touched me, I felt alive in ways I hadn't in years. One night, after hours of skin and sweat, he laid beside me and whispered, "If I had met you first, you wouldn't be his wife. You'd be mine." I didn't respond, but my silence was a confession. I'd stopped feeling like Richie's wife. I had become Dan's secret, his lover, his obsession, and deep down I was obsessed with him too. I started dressing differently. More curves, more lace. I wore lipstick in the middle of the day just because Dan liked the color. I started working out more, wearing perfumes he complimented, cooking meals I knew he craved. Richie noticed the changes. He even teased me about them. "Trying to impress the neighbors?" he joked one morning. I laughed, but inside I was screaming,
"No, darling.
I'm trying to impress your son." And each time I told myself I'd stop, Dan would corner me in the hallway, press his body against mine and whisper, "Just once more." And every time I gave in, because we weren't just playing with fire anymore. We were already burning. It was a Sunday afternoon when everything shattered. Richie had just returned from a business retreat in Austin. The air in the house felt still, almost too quiet, like the silence that creeps in before a storm. I tried to play my role, welcoming wife, doting hostess. I wore a soft pink dress, made his favorite roast, poured him a glass of wine. But I could feel Dan watching me from across the room. His eyes weren't subtle anymore. His stares had turned possessive, hungry,
Territorial.
I shot him a warning glance while Richie was busy talking, but Dan didn't care. He leaned on the doorway, sipping his whiskey like he owned the room and me. After dinner, Richie went up to the study to take a call. Dan and I were alone in the living room. The tension between us was unbearable. "I need to stop," I whispered, not even turning toward him. "We've gone too far." Dan stood behind me. "You don't want to stop." "I have to." He moved closer. "Tell me you don't want me." I closed my eyes. "I can't," I breathed. "But it doesn't matter anymore. It was never supposed to happen." Dan's hands gripped my waist. His lips brushed my neck. "Then let's stop pretending. Tell him. Leave him." I spun around, my heart slamming in my chest. "Are you out of your mind? He's your father."
Don's jaw tightened.
"And you're his wife. But you've been mine." I slapped him, not out of anger but panic. We had crossed every line, and now we were dancing on the edge of exposure. I felt sick, twisted. Then came the sound that froze my blood. A slow clap. We both turned. Richie stood at the foot of the staircase. His face was pale, expression unreadable, eyes locked on me. In one hand he held his phone. In the other a recording. Our recording. The security camera from the study I had forgotten even existed. He had heard everything. Every word. Every breath. Silence fell like a guillotine. "I built this empire for my family," Richie said, voice flat. "I gave you a home, Luna. I gave you everything. And you let my own son screw you under my roof." "Richie, please," I choked, taking a step toward him. He raised a hand. "Don't." Dan tried to speak. "Dad, it wasn't like." "Don't call me that." His voice cracked. "You're no son of mine." He walked out.
No shouting. No threats.
Just silence, and the slam of the door that followed. That was the last time I saw him in our home. In the days that followed, everything unraveled. Richie filed for divorce. Quietly. Discreetly. Just like a billionaire would. Lawyers came and went. Papers were signed. No media, no noise, just destruction behind closed doors. Dan tried to reach out. Called. Texted. Even showed up at my hotel room one night. But I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because no matter how much I wanted him, how much I craved the way he made me feel. It had all come at the cost of a man who once gave me the world. A man I betrayed. A man whose heart I shattered. Now I live with the weight of what I did. Not just the affair. Not just the lies. But the truth that I was the flame that burned the family down. And the worst part. A piece of me still dreams of Dan in the dark. Every single night. Have you ever imagined yourself in this kind of situation? What did you do about it? Subscribe to this channel and hit on notifications for more interesting stories like this.